All right, so this year what we're going to do is we're going to have a reading. So Matthew Gavin Frank, the author of Flight of the Diamond Flight of the Diamond Smugglers, is going to be doing a reading and then a Q&A with us. How many of you participated in the little book club that Susan put together so that we could read the book? I didn't do the club, I read the book. Okay, great. If you haven't read the book, you need to order it and read it. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, Matthew, because I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
All right, thanks. And thanks for having me. Thanks so much to Susan for finding me. I don't know, I'll use the term unearthing me since it seems appropriate. Madison Street Books, a fledgling independent Chicago bookstore, is selling the book on my behalf out there. So support your indie bookstore and get one if you like what you hear, and if you don't, get one and pass it along to people who aren't your favorite. I spent good portions of 2015, 2016, and 2018 on South Africa's Diamond Coast, and then up along the border up into Namibia, researching the book. And the germ of the book, I suppose, began, it's kind of incidental. I was in the town of Port Nolloth, South Africa, in a bar called, yes, Diamond Hunters. And I was sitting next to a former diamond diver, and with each subsequent brandy and coke that he drank, he kept divulging to me new methods employed by some of the local miners to smuggle diamonds out of the mines and sell them on the secondary and tertiary markets. One of the methods that I found most fascinating was he told me that a lot of folks trained carrier pigeons and snuck them into the mines. And even though folks had to pass through X-ray machines on their way onto mine property and on their way out, the South African government deemed it a human rights violation to over-radiate a worker. And so they had to actually set up placebo X-ray machines as well that would light up and whir in the same way as the actual X-ray machines. So folks never knew if their innards were being mapped or not, and folks would risk it sometimes and sneak trained carrier pigeons onto mine property concealed in lunchboxes, affix diamonds to small bags, rough diamonds, and attached to the pigeon's feet and oftentimes beneath each wing, and set them into the air to fly home to their families, where the diamonds would be unpacked and sold. The pigeon method, became it became so infamous and notorious because, of course, mine security uncovered that this was going on, that it became unofficially illegal to actually raise pigeons in the area along the Diamond Coast. And in fact, in Alexander Bay, one of the city officials actually made it illegal to not shoot a pigeon on site if you had the means to do so. So for a short period of time in Alexander Bay, South Africa, up along the Namibian border, if you happened to have a gun strapped to your hip and a pigeon crossed your path, and you did not pull that gun out and shoot that pigeon dead, and a member of the police force witnessed it, you could be fined. It didn't last long, but that was unofficially on the books. So I'm going to read a section of the book that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with pigeons, because this is not an ornithological conference. But they're in the book. So I'm going to excerpt this chapter because it's somewhat long, and it's about a visit I took to a mine in Namibian, in Kleinsia, South Africa. The mine was busy being shut down by the mine manager there, who I call in the book Johann McDonald. I've changed a lot of names. And yeah, I had to, in order to get onto the mine property, I had to submit, like over a month in advance, 5 copies of my passport and go through various background checks in order to be brought onto the property. It was interesting. So it's 7 a.m. and everything within the Kleinsia boom gates officially belongs to the Oppenheimers, which now includes me and the car I'm renting. In 1902, the year of Cecil John Rhodes's death, the London diamond brokerage firm Dunkelsbuehler and Company sent their hotshot 22-year-old diamond buyer, Ernest Oppenheimer, to South Africa. At first, Oppenheimer worked the firm as an independent dealer, but soon after his arrival, he settled in Kimberley and began to study De Beers' business principles. Seducing the locals with his financial prowess and oratorical charisma, Oppenheimer in 1912, a mere 10 years after his arrival in South Africa, was elected mayor of Kimberley. He used his position to further foster powerful political and economic connections and leverage them to take control of the De Beers empire as chairman in 1929. He thereafter consolidated the company's global monopoly of the diamond trade. When Ernest died in 1957, he passed control of De Beers to his son Harry, who in turn passed control to his son Nicky, who in turn passed control to his son Jonathan. Driving through this place, occupied essentially by 4 generations worth of white male Oppenheimers, I'm wondering if the penchant for perpetuating atrocity is a heritable trait. Today, I'm to meet with Johann McDonald, the man who still bears the title of De Beers mine manager. Beginning slowly in 2007 and accelerating in 2009, De Beers downscaled their interests in Kleinsia, sending the residents in a forced exodus into other parts of South Africa, onto the couches of distant family members and friends, and into other possible occupations. Now, for those who remain, survivalist proposals hang over the town. To turn the pit mines into hazardous waste dumps, to turn the migrant worker dorm into a prison. The 3 schools, primary, secondary, and high school, are cavernous and echoing shells, though rumor has it that some of the town's few remaining children take private swimming lessons from a former diamond diver in the high school's Olympic-sized pool, which is no longer heated or lighted. When the town was thriving, electricity, water, and housing were provided free to the residents. The water now jaundiced with decomposing pink-stink dung moss. Chimes made of bleached fish jawbones, hang from the porch eaves of Kleinsia's abandoned houses, each of which is low and square and painted white. The wind piles the dust against their walls. No one sits on their stoops, and the only people I see are rail-thin and clad in the same brown gumboots, the same Palatinate blue overalls X'd over the backs with yellow reflective tape, walking not into homes, but down the middles of roads that end at further boom gates, and beyond them, incalculable measures of diamondiferous red sand and dead birds decomposing in the dunes cum tumuli. Empty flagstaffs declaring no specific loyalty jut from the dust. When the wind comes, the sparse spiral grass, thick, ribbony ringlets whose penchant for strangling out the local flowers belies its own wild beauty, rattles like something poisonous about to strike. The parking lot of Johann McDonald's office, littered with shards of sun-dried eggshells, runs uphill to the building, and the structure appears askew, bearing the angle of some giant utility knife tips surfacing for air from its plastic holder. The surrounding caldera of mine dumps conceals old land collapses, and as the wind sweeps over, the primordial bumps and grinds with the post-apocalyptic, each indistinguishable from the other. A sign at the parking lot's border bears two red arrows, each pointing toward exactly nothing in opposing directions. At least there's a choice. Old wires no longer carry electricity, sag to the scalped tops of the dead star lilies that once had the strength to crack through this ruined asphalt. Along these wires, not even the ants make passage. The languishing carports reserve spaces for the fired and the dead. Mining engineer, this sign says. Mine garage foreman, says another. Dragline overseer, senior perimeter walker, safety manager. All having been ferried across the river that now flows only in the imagination or deep beneath the excavated sand. Still, in the distance, the ocean asserts itself. Its foam breaks soundlessly and serrated on the coast. The clouds look snotty. From the antennas on the mine office roof, a faint crackling, an upward sending of signals. And in panic, I rush up the 5 steps inside. I see McDonald's office before I see McDonald, having been directed down a narrow hallway lit with flickering fluorescence by a secretary sitting behind a dirty thermoplastic window and her arthritic finger. The place has the feel of a temporary satellite headquarters in a trailer, while the real thing is being constructed. But this is the real thing. The office, for the time being, is unmanned, but it is fully decorated, littered with accoutrements that seem to argue with one another. The coat tree hung with reflective chartreuse safety vests. The desk cluttered with papers, a stained De Beers coffee mug, a multi-buttoned office phone with a red message blinker, toy tractors and dump trucks, a blue and yellow box of choice brand condoms, distributed via Johann McDonald by the South Africa Department of Health to the remaining mine workers. Tacked to the bulletin board behind McDonald's desk are little greeting cards printed with De Beers' statements of value. Pull together, build trust, show we care, shape the future, and be passionate. The latter bearing the emblem of a Valentine's Day heart. Johann McDonald enters his office behind me. He is big and beleaguered, orange-haired, with skin easily given to reddening and rash. His stubble resembles beach sand. Orally, he is the sound of clothing coming together and apart, the swish of his yellow and turquoise De Beers windbreaker, a voice that sounds like it's unzipping something heavy, meant for winter. When he inhales, there's a soft guttural clicking at the back of his throat. He wears generously cut khaki pants. He exhibits the infectious anxiety of an overworked exile. He slams a clipboard on his desk, and a toy crane rolls off the edge. He fumbles for it in a half-hearted way, resigned to let it clatter to the floor. He utters the phlegmatic command, sit, without so much as pulling out a desk chair, and I comply and quickly feel oppressed, not so much by the office decorations, but by all the beige and pale green paint. The room is reminiscent of a 1970s guidance counselor's office, and I feel about to be pressured to declare what I want to do with my life. So, pigeons and diamond smuggling, he says. I guess you heard about the recent cave-in then. That's what everyone's heard. Behind him on the wall are a poster of a Great Dane staring down a Chihuahua and a printout of the Oscar Wilde misquote, "My tastes are simple, I am simply satisfied with the best." McDonald's head is perfectly centered between the two. He speaks of how a ring of smugglers illegally tunneled into a nearby diamond pit excavation, having in the middle of the night cut holes into the security fences and dug channels many meters below the surface just above the pothole or bottom of the pit. It's an open cast mine, McDonald says. Open because there's no ceiling, and cast because of the leftover that's cast out. The pits resemble pyramids in reverse, as if excavation sites for upside-down stepped necropoli. The actual structure, which once took up positive space, having been hauled away, so only its grave remains. And these tunnels are so narrow, McDonald says, only children can fit. And in there is a hell you can't imagine. Due to the lack of air, teams of hired children fill the tiny culvert, forming a constantly rotating Mobius strip. Those digging for diamonds at the terminus of the tunnel dig until they can no longer breathe, whereupon they circle back toward the entry point, gulp for air like whales, and then re-enter in turn. McDonald picks up a pamphlet from his desk and hands it to me. It's filled with De Beers' marketing prosaicisms, including an image of smiling black children, captioned ABC De Beers. We dig deep to support our young gems. In order to maintain the mine's vulnerability, workers are not only subjected to the random administration of concentrated liquid suppositories, reportedly stored in blue bottles labeled state secret, but also x-rayed when they enter and again when they leave. The x-rays are random, McDonald says, fingering the bed of a toy dump truck. Legally, it's a human rights violation to overdose someone on radiation, so the x-rays have to be spaced out. Sometimes they're getting a real x-ray, but more often they're getting a placebo. They never know which they're getting, and they risk it sometimes, McDonald says, even though he tells me that there are thorough pat-downs as well, and sometimes they make it. Laborers sometimes modify their clothing with lead-lined pockets and boot soles, train pigeons to fly over the Orange River from South Africa to Namibia and back, between the mines of Alexander Bay and Oranjemund, and safe houses lining the border, to the hands of wives and mothers and sons and grandsons. Anyone keeping pigeons is monitored by De Beers operatives. William McDonald tells me oftentimes the monitoring is 24/7, with hidden laser cameras and night vision binoculars. If someone is caught with a diamond, McDonald keeps repeating, it is not only a crime against De Beers, but also a crime against the state, and they are punished by mine security, hauled away within hours. The offender's spouse and children are sometimes evicted from the town too, thrown out into the gullet of the desert. Photographs at the Kleinsian Museum show suspected smugglers and their families being held in barbed wire enclosures by the mine's perimeter guards. Even if you possess an unpolished diamond, for 1 second, McDonald says, it's a crime against the state. For 1 second. Which means that if you were to pick up a pebble on the beach and that pebble turns out to be a diamond, whether you knew it or not, that counts as possession. If a De Beers operative were to catch me with it in my hand, and the beaches of Kleinsian and Port Nolloth are covertly patrolled by men with guns, I would be detained, fined, and carted off to prison, McDonald assures me. He gestures with his chin to a strange and, I fear, self-congratulatory installation on his office wall. The upside-down nameplates that once fronted the desks of all the people he had to fire. Mine secretary, cashier, environmental manager, exploration manager, driver instructor, safety officer, chief safety officer. McDonald speaks of how the artisans and engineers responsible for designing and implementing new and more efficient mining equipment also formed teams to unofficially design crossbows and catapults, some handheld, some industrial sized, in order to shoot hollowed-out steel bolts packed with diamonds into the desert. These teams calculate the trajectory of the bolt and pinpoint the small area of the desert where it is landed. Later, they or their co-conspiratorial friends and family will comb the sand for the bolts. And the wood pallets, that carry cargo and the machine parts are rarely x-rayed, McDonald says. So folks drill holes into them, line the holes with lead just in case, pack the holes with diamonds, and seal them off. He tells me that in his entire time with De Beers, he's held a diamond only once. You can see why people get the fever, he says. Though when I ask him what became of the diamond, he tells me that's an off-limits topic, and turns on his diffusers. No, really, it was just an ugly rock. I'm telling you, nothing became of it. Honestly, okay. I put the diamond back exactly where I found it. And well, I know exactly where it is. Suddenly, McDonald is standing right over me. I can feel his breath on my face. I can smell it. Yellow mustard, mostly. Such proximity silences me. He never touches me, much less looks into my eyes, as he leads me where few De Beers affiliates have been led, along cramped pale green hallways lined with doors or with blacked out windows and no nameplates on the outside. Exposed piping, a seemingly pumped-in humidity, and low ceiling evoke the boiler rooms of nightmare grade schools. When we reach the first stage of security, I must blow into a breathalyzer, held by a guard with prodigious pectorals and shaking hands. He wears a dull blue uniform, crisply ironed. In his belt holster, a handgun, a two-way radio, and what appears to be a glow-in-the-dark rectal probe. Behind him, I don't know what it was. My heart didn't like it. Behind him, a sign reads, "You are to place all loose items on the tray," and in the corresponding picture, a blue tray holds such benign and inexplicable things as a beaded bracelet, a blue plastic fork, a bottle of magenta nail polish, a battery, a coin, an apple, and orange. I have none of these. But I have my wallet, and the wad of tissues often carried by the allergic, which often raises the suspicion of non-allergic security guards who are driven, as is this one, to go through every tissue as if flipping through the pages of the Book of Revelation. Satisfied with the state of my snot rags, the guard hands me a yellow security vest. McDonald, meanwhile, checks his company mailbox, a tiny locked cabinet amid a wall of others, each with a blonde wood finish, evoking a 1950s bowling alley locker room. At the second stage of security, the tops of my shoes are combed by a rotating shoe brush, and I must drag the soles along a serrated grate. The same guard waits for me to finish so he can give me the pat-down, during which he finds my pen and paper. I told you it's a closed system, McDonald says, as the fluorescents flicker like doom. Just know that what goes in stays in. It never comes out. No pens, no glasses, nothing. Even this, gesturing to my pen, up until a couple of months ago was taboo. Up until a couple of months ago, De Beers was still mining here. There's no way you would have gotten in here, let alone with a pen. De Beers people couldn't bring pens in here. We proceed to 4 separate x-ray chambers, each barred by a locked door, each chamber a right-angled wound for adults, unfortunately green and about 3 feet square. McDonald is not exempt from any of this, and when we come out on the other side, the sun has become perfectly white, reflecting off the old mine hostels and razor wire. The multiple wire fences are spaced so as to prevent the diamond miners from throwing a diamond beyond all of them. Behind the hostels, a once menacing guard tower sinks into the sand, shortening inch by inch as the days pass. When a miner died on the job, his body was to be buried right here on the mine site, as De Beers believed that the corpse would be used to smuggle diamonds. He simply disappeared, his family notified, oftentimes many days later, by postcard, if at all. McDonald ushers me into the passenger seat of the white Toyota De Beers Company pickup, and we take off into the waste, within the waste, a blank spot on the map, an erasure, all 32,000 hectares, seemingly erased. Officially, McDonald tells me this mind's expanse doesn't exist. It's private, cloaked off anything resembling the grid, and indeed the miles upon miles of it are absent of visible life, an eternal breadth of undulating rubble of various shades and grains. Welcome to nowhere, he says. There are no birds. We're driving through the heart of destruction. It's totally closed. There's no agriculture here, no game, no farming. Even the birds avoid it. There are no birds. There's no agriculture. It's lockdown. There's nothing here. His voice growing high-pitched and panically excited in a what have I done sort of way. The place defies prefixes. Every single other extra pre or post I try to heap upon it, otherworldly, extraplanetary, prehistoric, post-apocalyptic. So of this earth and so not, the mind honors the look of the earth as if a synthetic model of the planet wedged into this corner of the planet itself. Something ancient cast in a new polymer, which itself has degraded to the point that it seems like the oldest thing in sight. Older than the actual mountains, which are still capable of growing their new scrub. The mind property feels biospheric, so insular with its false trenches and false mountains. The mist settles in the crotches of the barrens before steaming upward, as if this whole thing were still cooking, in progress, waiting to cool and settle. Strange how not long ago so many people milled about these endless anthills, looking for the shiny crumbs that stand in for our professions of love. 2,500 full-time employees carried from home to mine and back by private 24/7 hourly bus routes. No birds, McDonald says again, but I don't believe him, as I distinctly see tiny dark things whirling in the thermals above us. The thermals even De Beers can't block out. Watching the earth for patterns, listening out for its borborygmal supersonics, looking for home. When I blink, they are gone. And I wonder if our brains, as some salve against loneliness, out of instinct to ornament all of that empty space when beholding a blank sky, conspire to put birds there. McDonald and I drive. The company truck is fitted with a speed governor that beeps each time McDonald exceeds 80 kilometers per hour, about which he complains, punching the steering wheel. The roads are sand, compacted until they become a sort of dirt, and rutted with ridges that resemble the spines of some Paleozoic mudfish about to be unearthed into our present, about to become part of our story. He points out the window, references the rows of greened windbreaks anchored at the foot of the dump slopes and pit rims, and has an argument with himself. He's trying to work something out. Look at all of this effort at restoration, he says. The nets are fiendishly expensive. I'm spending 300,000 rand a month to keep Kleinzia going now. You see these dumps with the holes next to them? I've moved 30 million cubic meters of soil since 2011. We rounded off, recreate a natural style surface with the dozers. You don't hear people talking about De Beers doing this, trying to rehabilitate the environment. It's an ongoing cleanup of the mess we made. I don't like De Beers, because diamonds are a silly product. De Beers knows you can't sell a diamond on the secondary market because it's forever. You're selling his love. No, it's a cold, bloody stone. Sell it for hard cash. De Beers does a lot of bad, but also some good. I think of the Oppenheimer family, inhabiting their estates and urban sanctuaries, roving the grounds of their man-made forests, Japanese gardens, and tennis courts. When forging business deals with other companies, the Oppenheimers required the chief executives of those companies to send out official memos to their own employees, thanking De Beers for their willingness to work with them, and pledging, quote, "We understand that diamonds are different, special, and not a commodity." The Oppenheimers, along with the remainder of the De Beers executives, when taken together, well, you're nervous, they're known as the Syndicate, were banned from conducting first-hand business in the US from 1948 to 2004 due to their insistence on price fixing, a violation of antitrust laws. Still, they were able to peddle their diamonds in the US via loopholes and indirect methods, a network of separate contracted entities and retail conglomerates. Before entering the US, every De Beers diamond passed through a site, one of a series of clandestine international diamond dealing houses, and it was that site that often directly sold to US-based luxury retailers. Until 2004, when De Beers agreed to plead guilty to criminal price fixing and pay a multi-million-dollar fine, the Oppenheimers and their cohorts were in fact treated as an organized crime group in the US, which legally prevented any more than 3 De Beers executives from even being on US soil for any reason simultaneously. I wonder if Nikki and Jonathan considered this treatment a badge of honor, a testament to what Cecil John Rhodes once called so much power. I wonder if they even laughed a little on the inside when they wrote, "You reinforce our brand through the way you think and act every day. As you have heard both of us say many times before, the men and women of De Beers have a responsibility to live up to diamonds. The diamond's place in modern and future cultures, and the promise it holds for every person who possesses one, acts as an invisible force, pushing us inevitably and irrecoverably toward the right side of history." I wonder which of their secretaries took dictation for this memo. I wonder if she rolled her eyes when they decided to sign it forever. "Look," McDonald says, "we do want to rehabilitate the environment, but not at the expense of the surrounding economic area. This is still to be mined for diamonds once Transhex comes in. They're the managing group, big operations in Angola. There's still an estimated 4.5 million carats here that they know of. It's just not economically viable for De Beers to take them out right now. He tells me the forthcoming miners, like the miners before them, will brace themselves on one level or another in the pits, and as the diamonds collect in gullies, sweep the bedrock of the 60-some meters of sand atop it. It looks like an old slave-type setup," McDonald says. "They literally sweep the bedrock with brooms and dustpans. The sweepers are known as the Lashing Gang. In the old days, the Lashing Gang had on mine property their own tea room, where they sealed their envelopes with pliers, turned them into their supervisors, and received as a bonus a small sum and a cup of tea. The meager cash bonus was based on De Beers' calculated overhead, which they determined to be about 4 rand, or 40 cents US per meter swept. On average, the Lashing Gang had to sweep 16 square meters in order to unearth 1 diamond. So De Beers calculated their expense at about $6.40 US per gem, the mean size of which was 0.9 carats, which today has a market value of anywhere from 4,000 to 27,000. The Lashing Gang members received as a bonus less than 1% of the $6.40 per diamond found, about 5 cents, less than 0.00001% of the market rate. McDonald parks the truck, and we stand windblown and isolated in the dunes, our clothes percussive, our bodies soft beneath sleeves and collars and cuffs atop so many corpses, and the volcanic pipes that support them, and our vantage point is horrifying and privileged, and out here seemingly ultimate. There, on the upslope, the same windscreens that De Beers uses to lord over the wind form a kind of chalk outline around the holy burial site where the remains of a coin man were recently found by diamond miners. The man's skull rests among the foreleg bones of jackals, snake vertebrae, fish vertebrae, springbuck teeth, lizard mandibles, crayfish swimmerets, the badly burnt carapaces of 2 angulate tortoises, the wing bones of birds, the petrified stomach contents of the inert and the extinct, the relics and the refuse of human consumption, sacramental and throwaway. The remain's knees are bent to his chest, his arms and hands reaching toward his skull to cover either his ears or eyes. The position is not quite fetal, but the skeleton clearly couldn't bear to look at something. So this is like some sacred burial ground? I ask. And MacDonald stares at me as if I've watched too many movies, which I have. There are burial grounds all over the place, MacDonald says. If you travel from here to Cape Town, you'll probably drive over some kind of burial site every 20 meters. I have no doubt that if we were the last two people on Earth, and it appears that we are, I would have been eaten by now. He puts his hands on his hips, surveys this place. You know, I think I love it out here, he says. Sometimes I stay longer than I'm supposed to. You're a writer. I bring books out here. Out here, I learned Gaelic to cope with the stress. There are only 60,000 people in the world who speak it, you know. I've seen so many people come and go because of AIDS. I can tell he's working something out, repeating things he's said before in bars and in bed, but trying to pinpoint some larger shadow story that will help put all of his time living in and on an erasure into context. Before that, I was eating pills. I was on every medication known to man. He squats and his knees crack. He scoops up a fistful of sand and tosses it into the wind. Fuck, he says. This attempt to replant is a complete failure. The big challenge is to get things to grow. Some of these dumps have been reshaped and replanted for 10 years, 20 years, and still nothing grows. Though De Beers wants to restore this land, the indigenous population wants to devote it to farming and are busy fighting, likely in vain, MacDonald's efforts. The De Beers Environmental Division perpetuates the rhetoric that the land they disturbed has been so thoroughly ravaged that it has reverted to what they call a pure state, pure Namaqualand territory. De Beers believes that the desert here has ultimately suffered not from mining, but from the grazing of farm animals. They don't want anyone else making money off of it in the name of restoration and company policy backpatting. So the corporation wants to block the indigenous peoples from farming here, wants Transhex to have their way with a small portion of it, and wants the rest as their private garden. Their little spot to play with their bulldozers, compost cocktails, cardboard grow circles, shovels, and pails. I rehabilitated a flamingo once, MacDonald says, staring into the negated hectares. Amputated its injured wing, carried it out to a flock of flamingos, and it was good for a couple of days until the jackal got it. I did as much human intervention as I could, and then the jackal came in. Even if this stab at rehabilitation did work, even if Johann MacDonald and his puffy flamingo surgeon hands could make of this havoc something verdantly botanical, even if the jackal didn't call foul, wouldn't that also be insufficient? Atrocious even? Wouldn't it be a case of environmental restoration as a concealment of decades' worth of gleeful corporate atrocities? Given that atrocity is often birthed of passion, and should De Beers' senior environmental managers and spokesfolks be successful, the real atrocities, perpetuated since the days of the East India Company, Cecil John Rhodes and Barney Bernardo, will be redacted and overgrown with scrubby plants that will struggle a little harder than the rest of their species to flower. You know what the best thing about a diamond is, MacDonald says? You can't break it. You can't break a diamond. Gem-quality diamonds are indestructible. I nod. Anything that escapes destruction so completely seems the product of absurdity. Perhaps it's De Beers' gender narrative that seduces us into believing that diamonds are not absurd. That to be a man, one must woo a woman with a proper diamond, and to be a woman, one must want to be wooed in such a fashion. But surely there's more to it than that. A desire to possess something so ancient and so hard, fixed, a portion of the Earth's history, however cut and polished, in which we did not yet participate. A stage of fire, lava, a claiming of ownership of things that survived the stage which we could not, making them measurable in carats and wedged motionless into a strong setting. A claiming of ownership of the thing we call our home before we inhabited it, as it lay in wait for us, when the insects were as big as pigeons, and the pigeons crows, and the crows cows. Such subterranean stories our wedded ring fingers silently keep. So much more than the story we thrust upon it of kimberlitic pipes and rivers, oceans, mines, mine closures, the blood, the collapses, the dumps, the failed restoration, McDonald and me. I'm a terrible manager, he says, and walks uphill, away from the truck. I follow him until I reach a spot on the dump slope soft as quicksand. I sink to my shins. The windbreaker is taut over his back. He's looking for something. He bends down, examines the dirt, picks something up, and runs down the hill to me. I kind of like the way his body bounces, slides down the sand as if in slow motion, clumsy running crossbred with clumsy skiing. He shows it to me, holds it to my face. It's no larger than a pinhead. It's radioactive blue. A seed, he says. Cheers.
We have time for questions.
Your words rendered.
We're getting a mic here.
Oh, maybe I'm not supposed to call it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your words obviously rendered such. Lights, camera, action. Such vivid pictures, obviously. In sum toto, obviously, it really challenges a lot of the prevailing diamond origin stories. And I wondered if your publisher was worried about industry pushback and, in general, how it's been received.
Yeah. They were very much worried about industry pushback, and in fact, it had two separate reads by two separate law firms. So I was actually on the phone. I spent countless hours on the phone with lawyers, and so a lot of the language was massaged and changed a little bit small things to soften some of the rhetoric in places, I suppose. So yeah, they were very much worried about it. When the book came out, I wrote a separate piece that was picked up by the Revelator, and then it got picked up and went around the internet for a little while. And De Beers' vice president actually came after us a bit and accused me of fabricating the entire article and making up my own facts and things. But I had evidence that I wasn't making up those facts. And some of that evidence was photographic. And so basically, with the press's lawyers, we went through De Beers' accusations point by point and attached evidence that contradicted basically everything they accused me in the article of. So yeah, I honestly never expected this book to get out a little bit as it did. Never expected it to cross the desks of De Beers executives. I've spent my life writing about a lot of other things too, like, I was a restaurant chef for most of my life, so I wrote a lot about food and giant squid and things like this, and so I just, never expected this kind of pushback, and it was really unnerving for a while, and I lost a bit of sleep, but it's died down somewhat.
More questions?
I have a quick one.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
Love to hear other people's too. I just want to say thank you for, I feel like, I appreciate you kind of breaking my moral compass in this book, so thank you for that. And I guess I was wondering if you could talk to some of the greenwashing and just how entrenched, like, the changing of, or writing of history is, and how, like, well, even just, like, how instrumental they are in the apartheid in South Africa, and how much they benefited from conflict-free, but then also at the same time, like the Building Forever campaign that came out, and just how to hold those two pieces together of like keeping people in cages, but then we're gonna throw 10 million to uplift women's voices, and just how do we hold those two things at the same time?
Uncomfortably. We hold those things together uncomfortably. They repel, obviously, and it's, but it's, you see it, across governments and corporate entities, this lack of willingness to acknowledge and acknowledge, the atrocities perpetuated in the past. Forget about all of that stuff, because we now have an environmental division, so to speak. And their PR machine, as you all know, they're kind of endlessly powerful, and their pockets are somewhat bottomless. And so they have the power to greenwash in that kind of way and continue to erase history. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if some of the executives who are working for De Beers' environmental division don't know about some of this stuff. Also, because when De Beers' vice president came after me, some of the things that she accused me of fabricating were just easily provable with, 10 minutes worth of research, too. And so it's just a lack of willingness to look at it. The greenwashing campaign is, it's working, sadly. You see oftentimes, how do you hold this together? You see, 1 month, the New York Times just kind of, publishing an article about greenwashing in the diamond industry, and then you see, on their fashion pages, them exalting De Beers for their environmental responsibility. So I think we hold these conflicts and these contradictions in the same way that we hold them. It's sadly part of our fabric. We are living, it seems, in a corporatocracy, and and their power depends on negating the past and negating the bodies onto which they have perpetuated pain and atrocity. It's awful. But as William McDonald told me and showed me, he was a former geologist, and so he was really interested in rehabilitating that land, and he basically admitted that it's futile, and it's dead. Nothing is going to grow here. It's been so thoroughly poisoned that it's done. And the greenwashing campaign would have us believe otherwise.
We have time for 2 more questions, so we're going to do Emily and then Martin.
Hi, I hope it's okay that I ask this question. Now I know you're not here to represent all consumers, but you are removed from our industry. Right now you are standing in front of a whole room of I would say we're all pretty well involved in the jewelry industry and a lot of initiatives. How has writing this shaped your opinion of the diamond and jewelry industry? if I could give you that full platform of just giving us your totally unfiltered opinion, like what would you say to us?
Haha. There's more, yes. So yeah, so like, I mean, quite frankly, like, I mean, the disclaimer is, like, I do not feel qualified to claim an expert opinion over and onto the intricate nuances of the industry, you know, as a whole. I mean, it's a tapestry. It contains multitudes, right? And so my focus in the book was very, very narrow. You know, I focused on a few stitches in that tapestry, I think. And so, I mean, the jewelry industry as a whole, I think there are, you know, some lovely back alleys and floor alleys, you know, within the industry. Like, after all, like, I don't know, I labor in the arts. And I think, you know, a lot of jewelry makers, and I think a lot of the industry that sells the work of jewelry makers, you know, is, you know, part of that world is an artistic one. And I think that's lovely. People like beautiful things. People want to possess beautiful things. People want to make beautiful things. And I think there's absolutely, you know, a way to do it that doesn't, you know, harm an entire area and populace across decades. I'm not sure that the diamond industry has found a way to do that yet.
Matthew, we should go for a second before this, but I'm not into beers, but sort of like their executives, anything that says diamond on it passes across my desk at some point. I'm a very avid reader. And I read your book last year, and, you know, I loved it, but to the point back here about greenwashing, I find it very interesting. A lot of the points you made. Well, first of all, I want to say the book was great. Your reading was over the top. Unbelievable. I mean, it adds a whole different context and feel to it. You enraptured me. But I can just relate a little story. I have a couple of huge bookcases that are full of books about nothing but diamonds. And Garner Williams was a De Beers executive. He ran the mines in South Africa, wrote a big, huge book about it. And his son, I didn't know existed. I happened to go to South Africa a couple of years ago for the first time in my life. Visited Kimberley, because it's Mecca. And as you showed in your book, I think, it's run like a theme park that has nothing to do with what Kimberley was really about. But I kept my mouth shut as we were going through the tour because I knew more than the tour guide. But the essence of the tour, you know, you eventually wind up looking at the Eureka diamond, which is the diamond that started the whole business in South Africa. And the story is told there during that tour of how it was found by some children playing clippies with the stones, and somebody said, "Isn't that a pretty one? You know, look, can I have that?" And he took it to Johannesburg and found out it was a diamond, and that started the whole diamond rush in South Africa. On my way home, the very last day I was there, I went to a bookstore and was in there for about an hour just looking for books that I might find about South Africa, the politics, whatever, that I wouldn't find in the United States. And finally, the owner came up to me, the secondhand bookstore as well. She came up to me and she said, "Is there anything particular that you're looking for?" And I said, "Well, I'm a diamond cutter and I'm always interested in anything about diamonds." And so she brought a guy over and she said, "Can you take him upstairs and there was a room up there with other books." It wasn't locked or anything, but it was, you know, not somewhere you just wander into, and showed him, we have a couple shelves of books about diamond, or mining, gold and diamonds, and mostly gold. But I saw this book, it just grabbed my attention. It was an older book, and it was written by a guy named Williams. So, and I knew Garner Williams. It's probably one of the most expensive books I have in my collection. And I grabbed it, you know, and it was not expensive, you know. And on the trip home, I realized I went to South Africa for that book. That book found me. Because in that book, it's a book about the minor players in the diamond industry. It's not Barney Barnado and Cecil Rhodes and all of them. It's the other guys, and they're mostly white people, but in that book, and he is the son of Garner Williams. He ran the De Beers Consolidated Mines in South Africa. And this book, he tells the story of how the Eureka diamond was found by a black child who was playing with his white playmates. And that's where it came from. The story has been told forever that it was a white girl. And it's documented. He has the documentation. He wrote it. He was a De Beers employee. That story, to this day, in every other book I have, never mentions a black child. And he wrote it specifically because I want to say it was written in the 1940s off the top of my head, but I don't have it with me, so I can't exactly remember. But that's to the extent of greenwashing. The origin story is false. And it's known to be false, and it's provably false. And it's taken me almost 50 years of research to find that. So, to your point back there, incredible. And I really enjoy your work because it's very lyrical, and it comes from somebody outside the trade. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
I know we said, is my mic?
No.
I'll trade. I'm not.
We're so good. The catering truck got stuck behind an accident. They're just setting up now, so we're not missing much.
So we actually do have time for one more. I just have a quick one, and you didn't do a reading about the little boy, Cece, who you feature in the book. And I know you illustrate a lot of environmental harm that can't be replenished, and this is a mine site that at least one, De Beers is leaving, somebody else is coming in, but you keep in touch with him, and I'm just wondering, how does he sustain himself now? Is he still smuggling diamonds? Does he have a livelihood now? How do he and his mom survive in the new economy?
Yeah, so when I met Msizi for the first time, this was in 2015, he was 13, and he was laboring in the mines, yeah, he's not supposed to be laboring in the mines at 13. It actually violates the law in South Africa. But what I found in the Diamond Coast is that what happens on the Diamond Coast stays there, and they pretty much the Diamond Coast is run essentially, or was in 2015 at the very least. It was basically run with its own set of rules and mores that didn't necessarily chime with South African law, and and De Beers actually claimed that they were ignorant of some of the stuff that was going on along the Diamond Coast too, whether they were or not. Who am I to say? I suppose. I mean, one could look at other precedents and render a judgment on that, but. And I actually met Msizi and his mom shopping. We were both buying iceberg lettuce, and I struck up a conversation, and Msizi's mother actually encouraged him to speak with me. I've changed his name also, and so I got her cooperation, and kept in touch. For a while, I haven't been in contact with Msizi or his mom for a couple of years now, but last I heard, they were living with a relative in Johannesburg. They had left the Diamond Coast and were living with, I think it was his mother's sister in Johannesburg.
Sorry, Wendy.
That's okay.
You can check with him at lunchtime. Because we do need to wrap up now and get you guys to lunch. So, Matthew Gavin Frank, Fly the Diamond Smugglers.